Hello everyone, this is G and I'm back with another video. No camera today because it's Saturday afternoon. It's a nice day here in New York City, and I quite frankly don't feel like being on camera today. But I hope everybody's well. I think it's been about a week since I made my last video. I've just been very busy this week, and when you're very busy, you're also very tired. But I came across this article on Screen Rant talking about the latest Captain Marvel comic, and given that it's talking about Carol's costumes, and in particular her black swimsuit costume, as is referred to here in the article, I thought I would cover the article and make a response and try to give a little bit of history on Carol's costumes and just the critiques, let's say, I have of this particular article from Screen Rant. So, hope everybody's been well. Let's get started. So, it reads here. The funny thing is that it says TLDR, which is too long, didn't read. Well, my video is going to be, it's probably going to be too long, didn't listen to, given how I tend to ramble and rant at these type of things. But I will try to keep it at a decent time. I promise. But anyway, it says Captain Marvel comic mocks the famous costume the MCU skipped. Of course, referring to her black costume with the yellow thunderbolt, right? So it says here, in Captain Marvel number 27, issue 27, Hazmat pokes fun at Carol Danvers' old Miss Marvel costume for being merely a swimsuit, one the MCU has obviously skipped over. The MCU doesn't seem to mind its skin-tight jumpsuits and bodysuits for the women, but apparently a swimsuit, which is probably more like a leotard, is suddenly a problem. But anyway, it says here that this article is by Drew Molo, and at least at the time I first read this, it was published 19 hours ago, so about a day, right? So it's published yesterday. All right, so let's get into it. So then there's this image comparing Carol's classic costume, which is the black and red number with the thunderbolt, and then her current day costume, which has been around for about what, almost 10 years now. I think she got rebranded as Captain Marvel in 2012, which is when they they put Kelly's Sue DeConnick on the title, which in my personal opinion, having followed this for several years, I think let's just say it was a big mistake. But this particular image, I want to compare not just the costumes, right? I'm going to just admit it. I prefer the black costume. Right, I don't think the Captain Marvel look is a good look for Carol Danvers. I don't think it's a good design. But I don't want to just talk about the costumes, right? The colors or the costume itself. I want to talk about, I guess you could say, like the visual narrative being told in these two images. Like, look at the black costume, right? Her classic costume, right? When I see this image, right? And admittedly, I am biased. But when I see this image, I see a powerful woman, right? Like stepping onto the stage, right? Her shoulders are pulled back, her chest is pushed out, right? She's literally pulling this curtain or whatever it is. I don't particularly remember this particular image, but who knows? Whatever, right? But she's literally pulling this open, right? And you see her leg coming forward. She is stepping through, right? She is owning that image, right? It's just a very powerful, at least in my opinion, very powerful visual, right? This strong woman, you can see the muscles in her thighs, you can see the muscle in her upper shoulders, right? This physically powerful woman is tearing this image apart, right? And she's stepping onto the stage, she's stepping on to the scene, right? To me, visually, it's just very powerful. You can even tell with the look on her face, right? She did not come here to play games, right? Now you look at the Captain Marvel one, right? This is of course meant to be the classic flying superhero Superman type pose, which is fine, except that she just looks very goofy. I mean, even the outstretched arm, right? The arm that's coming toward the viewer, right? It's slightly bent, right? It's not straight. It's not straight on, right? And she just looks, at least in my opinion, the way this was drawn and composed just looks very goofy, especially with the starburst or whatever it is behind her. It looks to me more like she like got clocked in the head or something, and she's like about to like fall out of the sky and toward the ground, than necessarily like a powerful, heroic superhero flying in to save the day. That type of thing, right? It definitely does not evoke the Superman like image that they wanted to. But continuing. Right, and I just threw this in here because this is, of course, just one of my favorite images of her. This is the Miss Marvel cover that, or I guess was, yeah, it's a cover that Frank Cho did back in the day, right? And this is just one of my favorite images. It's like whenever I think of, you might hear some noise outside because it's Saturday and it's New York City and it's springtime, so people are outside. But this was by Frank Cho, and yeah, this is the image that always pops into my mind to this day, whenever someone says Carol Danvers or Miss Marvel. Right? It's just, again, you see the strength in her design and the musculature. Right, the chest is out, the shoulders are pulled back. It looks like a superhero pose, right? So this is just one of my favorites, and that's why I threw it in here. Right, this is what Carol used to look like. And then going back to the article, it says, warning, spoilers for Captain Marvel 27 below. So it says here, while popular superheroes go through many wardrobe changes throughout the years, Captain Marvel's latest comic book took time to poke fun at one of her old costumes, one that got overlooked from her origins when she was introduced into the MCU. When a group of Carol's female friends gathered together to take her out for a night of drinks and speed dating, oh my, what a wonderful story. That's exactly what comic book readers want to read. A girl's night out. One of the heroes bring up the fact that her dress exposes her bare legs, bringing to mind her old Miss Marvel outfit, which is criticized for being merely just a superhero swimsuit, which I see no problem with. But anyway, well, here's the thing. Carol used to be a drunk, right? It's actually been a part of her story for a long time now, since the late 1990s, I think. There was an Avengers storyline where she actually gets kicked off the Avengers because she was hiding her drinking problem from them. I might be wrong, but I think that story was actually written by Brian Michael Bendis, of all people. He actually could write one, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong, though. It's been a very, very, very long time. But why in the world that her supposed female friends, especially characters like, say, Jessica Drew, the Spider Woman, who literally saved her life when Rogue dumped her into the San Francisco Bay, you would think they would know. You would think they would know, right? That Carol cannot drink. You cannot take Carol out for a night of drinks with the gal pals, because guess what? She has a drinking problem, right? It was actually Tony Stark who had his own drinking problem, right? The famous or infamous to some Demon in a Bottle storyline from many, 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 many moons ago, who actually helped her get into AA and get back on her feet. So, why in the world the writer of this comic issue, which I think, if I remember correctly from reading the article on, is still Kelly Thompson. I reviewed a few of her issues of Captain Marvel, like 2019, I think it was, and I didn't like her writing then, and I doubt I would like it now. I've seen several of the reviews from the Tanner twins, and nothing about the comic seems to have improved in my personal opinion. But yeah, I kind of take issue with taking a recovering alcoholic out for drinks. But let's look at this image here. Now, granted, this is from a very, very, very long time ago, and she's obviously, in a very bad place if she's guzzling a bottle of liquor like this, right? But just look at the way her body is posed here, right? Look at, as she's like literally flexing, like her what is that, like her left arm, right? Is literally, she's got her fists clenched, right? She is flexing her muscles here. You can clearly see her biceps and her shoulders, right? Her upper arms, and even here in this image, even though she's in a very bad way emotionally, right? Trying to drink her problems away. Still, the way her body is positioned and posed still speaks of strength. She looks like a very strong woman guzzling a very strong drink, right? So, again, I don't see where this costume is so bad. I mean, there are plenty of bodybuilders who probably wear this because guess what? It allows you to show off certain parts of your body, like your arms or your legs, or at least portions of them. But anyway, moving on. Right, it says, when Carol Danvers was introduced as Miss Marvel in 1976, she was actually introduced as Miss Marvel in 1978. That's when she first got her solo series. I would know this because I read her original solo series written by, I believe it was Jerry Conway, right? But here's what it says. Her original costume was basically a female version of fellow Kree warrior Marvel. Yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough, that is true. With other creators trying to balance functionality with the over sexualized portrayal of female superheroes at that time. You have to remember that that time was the late 70s, so it was very much in the way of the second wave feminist movement. In fact, if you look at the letters page from the old 1978 1979 comics, which you can find online if you're interested, you will see that feminism of the day was definitely in influence on Carol as a character and in the way the book was written at that time. Right? So it says when Chris Claremont and David Cockrum came on, they came on about 1980, I think. They gave Carol a new costume altogether, complete with a new lightning bolt symbol, black thigh-high boots and arm-length gloves, and her old scarf turned into a red sash. That is indeed correct. This would become Carol's classic costume, which would remain unchanged during her time with the Avengers until her experiences with the X-Men saw a cosmic upgrade that resulted in a new outfit, hairstyle, and even a new name, Binary. This is true. I hate the Binary costume personally, and once I get to it, I will explain why. Although she later went by Warbird, following a significant power reduction, she returned to her classic costume and title until 2012 when she became Captain Marvel. She embraced her new title with a costume that borrowed elements from all stages of her life as a fighter pilot, superhero, and woman, which has become her most iconic costume to date. First of all, that last statement, in my personal opinion, is untrue. Her iconic costume to this day is still the Black Lightning Bolt spinning suit costume. Okay, that one literally lasted decades from 1980 to 2012 with very few breaks in between, right? Again, there was Warbird, there was Binary, but generally speaking, that was her look for literal decades up until 2012, right? So the Captain Marvel costume that we currently know has only been around for a decade, and you're gonna tell me that's more iconic than the costume she literally had for almost as long as I've been alive, if not more. Come on now. Okay, it's not the most iconic costume she has had. She is in the public eye currently because Marvel keeps trying to push her as their version of Wonder Woman or Superman, and it's not working. But let's continue. Right, so this is what Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers, originally looked like. This is the cover of the very first issue that was from January of 1978, I believe. So, right, so you can see that again. It's the superhero pose, which I think is done much better here. You can see that her arm is straight. It's very strong, right? Her body's just like ramrod straight, except for her other arm, which is cocked back and kind of pulled into her side. Yes, and yes, I will admit I'm not a big fan of this costume mainly because I'm not a big fan of the whole exposing the belly button thing. It just looks weird to me. And although you can't see it here, the back of the costume is also cut out in a similar triangle type design. So this is the first costume that she had. Yes, it's very silly looking. It was the late 70s. But here's the thing, I've actually read the stories in here. And the stories, I think, are fairly well written for their day. They are solid stories. And interestingly enough, when Carol started out in these stories, in her first issue, she was not in the military anymore. She'd actually left the Air Force, left NASA, and was now an aspiring writer writing about her experiences. And the interesting thing is that she wasn't necessarily trying to be a superhero at this time, because at the time there was this strict divide between Carol Danvers and Miss Marvel. Carol would pass out, right? And Miss Marvel was envisioned originally as the expression of Carol's Kree warrior instincts, because now she had the Kree powers and abilities of Captain Marvel. So Miss Marvel was more an expression of her warrior side, of the Kree warrior that she now was, as opposed to just this superhero persona. Right? That storyline kind of got dropped as it went on, as many things do when the character's been around for about 40, 50 years at this point. But that is how it started out with her when she got her original solo series after being a sidekick and potential love interest to Captain Marvel in his books back in the late 60s. There is a history here that I don't think Drew is knowledgeable of or wants to tell the audience that's reading this article. But anyway, continuing. So there was this first costume. Then you had this one, which is the same thing, except they covered up the stomach. Much better, in my personal opinion. I'm very much either go for the crop top or just cover the whole upper body. One or the other. Don't do this whole somewhere in the middle thing. I just personally find it irritating. Right? But this was the next one. Right? And then you can see she has the red sash around her throat. Not a good idea, and I'll explain why that's not a good idea in a little bit. Right, but then the next image, of course, is her most iconic costume. Right, this was when Chris Claremont and David Cockrum got on the book, and they gave her a totally different look, as was described in the article. You know, domino mask, swimsuit costume, as they put it. The sash got moved to her hips, which is a good idea. Visually, it's striking. It breaks up the image a little bit, right, with a pop of red, a pop of color. And of course, this is just a classic artist's way to emphasize a female character's hips, right? But then you have the gloves, you have the boots. Yeah, simple, but in my opinion, her best look. Now, here's the interesting thing in particular about the sash. See, here's the thing. When the mantle of Miss Marvel got moved to Kamala Khan, I think in 2013, when they made her design, they moved the sash back to the neck area, right? Now, I don't know if that was just because they thought it would look cool, or if that was supposed to be a nod or homage to the original Captain Marvel design. No, not Captain Marvel, sorry. The original Miss Marvel design, which I demonstrated a few panels ago, but I have never been comfortable with the scarf around the neck thing. Okay, first of all, it's not a good substitute for a cape. And number two, do you want her to end up like Isadora Duncan? Do you want her to end up like Isadora Duncan? For those who don't know, Isadora Duncan was a dancer, right, in the early 1900s, and she died. She died in France when her scarf got tangled in the rear hubcaps of the car. It even says here, right, affectation, said Gertrude Stein when she heard the news of Duncan's death, can be dangerous, right? She was a ballet dancer, and her cause of death was strangling. So yeah, do we really want this young girl to end up like Isadora Duncan? Do you really want a villainous character to literally string her up by her own scarf? Is that what y'all want? Because that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. Right? But I just had to point that out because that's this scarf around the throat has always irritated me. Because again, do you want to end up like Isadora Duncan? Because that's how you end up like Isadora Duncan. But moving on. Right, now, back to Carol's costumes. We have her costume as binary, and I've always hated this costume. They were trying to riff on the Phoenix thing. It did not work. And dear God, this costume irritates me. The red skin, the white bodice thing. It looks like a giant arrow just pointing to her vagina. I know what the female anatomy is. I am a woman. I know exactly what the female anatomy is like. I do not need this visual Hector, I, I just hate this. I've always hated this costume. Like, if they had just done like a different costume, but then had like the flames on the legs, that might have been cool. But the hair, the red body, just the way the white top leads to uh, uh, the the bikini area, it just irritates me so much. I hate this costume. And then, of course, there was her short-lived, I guess, military-inspired Warbird costume, which I think was part of like an alternate take on her, or like an ultimate series or something. I don't think it ever became main continuity. I don't think it was 616, but it's been a long time, right? And then, of course, her most current costume, which is just her in a bodysuit, right? And I'm going to later on explain why putting her in a bodysuit is by no means avoiding the dreaded male gaze, right? But if you're familiar with Captain Marvel, you'll know that they actually had her looking fairly masculine and androgynous for several years, up until news that the Captain Marvel film was actually going to be made. Then they started giving her a more feminine appearance, to make her look closer to Brie Larson, who has a very feminine appearance. And even still, if you follow the comics, right, depending on the artist, even if they give her long hair, they'll usually de-emphasize things like her bust line. I believe the only reason this image looks as good as it does, and I don't think it's a great image, it doesn't look a damn thing like Carol Danvers, is because this is from Captain Marvel #1, and this was drawn by Amanda Conner. And Amanda Conner is not afraid of the female form, though I will say, I think personally, having seen her art, especially for DC, she's done a lot better. Look at her Power Girl covers, much better than what she did here for Marvel. I think this was back in 2019. Right, but moving on. It says here, in Captain Marvel 27 by Kelly Thompson and David Lopez, Jessica Drew is able to persuade a heartbroken Carol out of her apartment, but her plans to distract her with superhero missions backfire as Captain Marvel devotes her entire life to these missions, filling any remaining downtime with sleep. Oh, I actually do know the feeling on that one. I do sleep a lot whenever I have downtime because I'm always tired because I'm always working. Jessica attempts to correct this by forcing Carol out of her uniform and into a dress for a night on the town, inviting Carol's friend Spectrum, also known as the original Captain Marvel, or rather, I should say the first woman to be Captain Marvel, and the second Captain Marvel in Marvel's comics. There was Marvel, and then there was uh, Monica Rambeau, who became Captain Marvel in a comic in the 80s, like 82 or 83. It was definitely the early 80s. I think Young Ripper has a video about that. But yeah, she was Captain Marvel long before Carol was. Carol's like fifth in line, if that. But anyway, continuing. Carol's friend Spectrum, Hazmat, and her Kree half sister L'Oreal. At the very least, they didn't invite Rogue. I'll give them that much. But it says here, L'Oreal, aka the Accuser, to provide support, love, and possible backup in case she resists. When Carol is pushed out to say hello, Monica and Jennifer compliment her cute dress, especially Jennifer, who has never seen Carol's bare legs in person. Of course, I've seen them a million times on the internet because he used to fight crime in a swimsuit, says Jennifer before she wisely cuts herself off. And this is the panel they're talking about, right? You see Jessica trying to pull Carol, and Carol Danvers, a woman who used to take incredible pride in her appearance and her sexuality, tugging at a miniskirt is amazing to me, as if she's somehow embarrassed. But I guess this version of her has to be embarrassed of who and what she is. She cannot be confident because that would not be relatable. Right, but you see Jessica pushing her here, although Jessica's in a pretty risque outfit herself, it looks like. Says, hi guys, thanks for coming to my, I don't know, intervention, I'm guessing? Yes, intervention. You're trying to make the alcoholic go out for dating and drinks. This is a wonderful intervention, Jessica! right? But then you have Spectrum saying, great dress, smart. And then you have Hazmat here, who I thought had to wear a special costume because she's basically radioactive, but maybe things have changed. I haven't followed this comic in nearly 2 years. But it says here, yeah, wow. I've never seen your bare legs before. Yes, because a woman in a miniskirt is such an odd sight. But anyway, I mean, in real life, of course I've seen them a million times on the internet because you used to fight crime in a swimsuit. But, well, you know what? I'm just gonna stop talking now. Smart Jennifer. Very smart. Demean her previous costume by saying it was just a swimsuit. Right? But moving on. Says, despite being one of Carol's most memorable costumes, it's hard to argue with Hazmat's comment. Well, my whole video is about arguing with Hazmat's comment, buddy, come at me. But anyway, because it's true. The old costume is basically a swimsuit with a mask, gloves, heels, and sash. Would you say that, sir, to an Olympic athlete who wears a leotard, which isn't all that different from the supposed swimsuit that you and this comic, I should say, have reduced Carol's classic costume to? In the past, female characters or superheroes have constantly had to be defined within the context that the stories are written with male readers in mind, resulting in costumes and appearances geared for sex appeal instead of practicality. Okay, let's focus here for a moment. Number one, what is so damn wrong with sex appeal? You act as if women cannot appreciate another woman's sex appeal. This is the dreaded male gaze argument. It had to be written with male readers in mind, resulting in costumes geared for sex appeal, aka the male gaze. Forgetting that women actually, at least most women, like to be gazed upon by men every once in a while, right? We actually like it so much that we marry men and we have their children. So, yeah. But anyway, and then this argument of practicality. This is a Marvel comic. She is a superhuman being. Okay? This is not about practicality. No hero's costume, with the exception of perhaps Iron Man, is about practicality. No one argues practicality for Wolverine or the X-Men or Bishop or anyone else, with the exception again of Iron Man, because he's only a normal human. He needs mecha to do what he does. Nobody argues practicality for those type of characters. If you go to DC, no one argues practicality for Batman or Superman wearing skin tight costumes. But suddenly we have to argue practicality when it comes to a woman. Believe it or not, there are videos by Shadiversity, which I have um, linked in the description, which actually show under certain instances and circumstances that yes, a tight, skimpy costume might actually be the more practical option. But again, no art, especially in comic art, pop art, is done for practicality. She's a supernatural being who can shoot lasers from her hands. If this were anything practical, then guess what? Her hands would constantly be exposed. She wouldn't be wearing gloves all the time. Because guess what? Her superpowers would burn through the gloves. This is not about practicality. Okay? This argument, well, let me read the rest and then get to my second argument. Carol's original costume had an exposed midriff and bikini briefs, which I demonstrated. Yes, that's true. And although Cockrum's redesigns were an improvement, they would be considered too revealing by today's standards. You mean today's standards of wearing a bodysuit? Because that's pretty much what a lot of Marvel's female characters, in particular in the MCU, do. They wear skin tight bodysuits. So a bodysuit is okay, although that can also appeal to the male gaze because it's going to be hugging a woman's curves. But a bodysuit is all right. But a supposed leotard or superhero swimsuit is somehow a bad thing. Okay, like when's the last time you looked at Sports Illustrated, which is famed for its swimsuit issues, and saw a woman on there that was in a one piece? One piece swimsuits are not used really anymore to try to appeal to men, right? It's the slinky, itsy bitsy teeny weeny little polka dot bikini, and and then some if you're trying to overtly appeal to a man's sensibilities, so too revealing by today's standards. Although Carol has proven herself a soldier, avenger, and intergalactic warrior, such costumes say more about comics and the society they were published in than they do about the character herself. Here's the problem with this argument. First of all, it is playing respectability politics, and I detest all politics, but I especially detest respectability politics because you are arguing uh, that fans or comic fans or society would not respect her for her military history because first of all she was not a soldier. Soldiers are in the army. She was an air force pilot, so she was an airman. Get it right, she was an airman, she was an astronaut, she's been a lot of things, but she's never been a soldier. Captain America though was a soldier because he was in the army. You might want to get it right, okay? But here's the thing: the costumes that most superheroes wear are not a reflection of their profession, current or former. Captain America's costume is literally him draped in the American flag, right? That's what it represents, America. It does not look like or represent military history or Captain America's military history because then it would probably resemble a 1940s soldier's uniform, which is not what he dresses up in, right? Wolverine was a soldier in World War II, yet his costumes don't look like military gear, right? You take characters like, say, I'm going to go to DC here, right? Superman, right? He works as a news reporter, yet he does not fight in a dress shirt and pants, right? He doesn't wear a costume that's covered in microphones, right? You go back to Marvel. Nightcrawler's costume is a nod back to his acrobatics, right? And the whole thing is that his entire design is meant to make him look like a devil, to make him look like a blue imp, because it's a commentary on how he looks scary and devilish, but he's actually one of the nicest characters and a devout Catholic. It is not about looking like what he does for a living. You are not going to find too many people in comic books whose superhero costume is a reflection of their day-to-day profession. For example, John Stewart Green Lantern. He was in the Marines. His costume doesn't look like anything you would see in the Marines. Spawn, I think, was in the Marines and worked for the CIA. Right? He doesn't. Spawn's costume doesn't look like anything you would see from the CIA or from the Marines. So in any way trying to argue that these costumes need to look like what these people do for a living, or to argue without any real solid proof that somehow Carol having a aesthetically pleasing, sexy costume, right, somehow was demeaning to her, right, despite her history as a soldier and Avenger, intergalactic warrior, is a very weak argument. If anything, she had one of the more modest costumes, especially once it got to the black costume on. There are much more revealing costumes. Ever seen Black Cat? Ever seen Black Cat? Right? But let's continue. Let's continue with this. Right? Here's the thing. This is Carol Danvers' current costume, right? It's just the bodysuit, which I got no problem with here. I think this image is actually quite nice. But here's the thing. As I said earlier, this is by no means avoiding the male gaze, right? Jerry Ryan wore pretty much the same thing, right? More or less a very fitted, right? Full body covering bodysuit, right? The only skin you actually see is her face and her hands. Yet she was the most controversial character on Voyager, right? Because guess what? A lot of guys still found her hot despite the fact that her body is pretty much covered up. Why? Because guess what? Certain things are still pretty obvious. There are two things there that are still pretty damned obvious about her. Her striking blue eyes. But anyway, right? Obviously, this is still going to turn many men and some women's heads because Jerry Ryan looks damn good in a tight in a tight outfit, right? Or if you watch wrestling, you're probably no doubt familiar with the fact that Sasha Banks likes to wear her form-fitting, skin-tight jumpsuits and bodysuits. And again, many men and more than a few women are going to find this very attractive. If you put an attractive woman in a tight bodysuit that's going to show off her curves, guess what? You are not avoiding the male gaze. Maybe you're not showing as much skin, right? Again, the only thing you can see here is Sasha's head and her hands, right? But you're certainly not avoiding the male gaze, right? That's not avoiding it at all. So please stop with this idea of, oh, her current costume is less sexualized, right? Because it's somehow avoiding the male gaze. It's not. It's simply appealing to the male gaze in a different way. Or if it is avoiding the male gaze, it's because they don't want to emphasize things that will be attractive to a man's senses, such as the hips, the thighs, the bust, stuff like that. But please stop acting as if, oh, covering up a woman in a bodysuit is suddenly going to make men turn their heads. That is not how this works. It's just another way to appeal to the male gaze if you know what you're doing. You put a woman who can fill out a bodysuit, every man is going to look at her. Now, here's another thing that I want to talk about, right? Because this person talking about was about, her previous costume was demeaning to her. This costume was demeaning to her in some fashion. Guess what? Guess what? I always associated power and strength with Carol back in the day, and in particular with this costume. I mean, look at this. She is casually shoulder pressing this truck over her head. And you know why she's doing that? Because she just saved these three little boys' lives. This is from the very first issue of her 2006 solo run that was written by Brian Reed, which is a definite recommend in my book. There was only one bad issue, and that was issue 49. That was it, right? But here she just looks crazy strong, right? Look at her arms. Look at her upper body. She just looks incredibly powerful to me, right? And this panel here, I don't know which comic it comes from, but this panel here, where she's pulled some guy out of the Venom symbiote, right? You see this. This is from the back, right? But you can see her legs. You can see the back of her arms, right? And the guy's like, "What the hell, lady?" And she's like, "It's Miss. Now sit, loser." Looks pretty strong to me. Carol, to me, before she got rebranded and ruined, in my personal opinion, as Captain Marvel, always was represented strength, right? She had her flaws, she had her issues, right? Her drinking problem, but she was not a weak person, right? And visually, at least in my opinion, she was never depicted as weak. Her visual design often emphasized her muscles because she was strong and she looked the part. She looked like she could come in and save your life, and she looked damn good doing it. Guess what? Power is incredibly attractive. Power in and of itself is sexy. Why do you think so many people want to be in shape and want to have abs and ripped muscles? Because it looks good. Stop having this hate boner for beauty. It is annoying, right? But moving on. Considering their brand and namesake, one can understand why Disney chose to skip this costume when it was time for Carol Danvers to make her MCU debut in Captain Marvel. That type of decision is actually quite common in this age where comics are frequently adapted into film or television. What you mean is that they are sadly hoard out, right? And now Marvel and Disney are the pimps. But anyway, with studios realizing that what works for one medium may not be as realistic or in some cases suitable for another. I would agree with this in practice, but not in reality, because with all of the effects that they can do, they actually can do reasonable adaptations of superhero costumes and just the superhero genre. Yes, there can be difficulty in taking something, or rather adapting something from a comic book to a film. Nice. There are certain realities you have to deal with. But many people such as Eric July, and I would agree with him, feel that these changes are made not because they are dealing with the realities and the practicalities of filmmaking and sort of being chained and pinned down by what you can do and what you can't do, but rather these changes are done to appease a very niche audience, right? The woke who don't actually buy the comics, right? And who don't actually care about what these designs represent. They just want control, right? This is not about making adjustments for a new medium. This is about pissing off classic readers and classic fans like myself, and yes, many men who read comics. Comics has always been male dominated, and there's nothing in and of itself wrong with that. But it's about pissing off the classic fan base and appealing to people who don't actually care. They don't actually care. They don't actually spend money on this stuff. They simply want something to complain about, and companies like Marvel and Disney consistently give in again, again, and again, and again, and again, and they lose money again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Anyway, continuing. Fortunately, Hazmat realized to stop talking while she was ahead, and Carol didn't let that little comment derail her evening that culminated in her ending up with Doctor Strange. So, aren't you still playing in the female stereotypes by having her end up with a strong, handsome, powerful man? Aren't you still playing into female stereotypes? I don't know. But when it comes to the first sentence, when it talks about, Disney choosing to skip the swimsuit costume when they brought Carol to the MCU in the Captain Marvel film, I'd like to point out that Disney's also, through Marvel Studios, releasing the Black Widow film, where Scarlett Johansson, an actress noted for the very feminine build of her body, right, is wearing a skin tight black leather costume, and you can see by this image here that they have no problem putting her in a very feminine pose and emphasizing her hips, in particular where the whatever this red symbol, this hourglassy thing looking, is cinched in, right around her hips and her waistline. So they don't mind exploiting her body, but Carol Danvers had to lose her swimsuit costume. But this is totally fine. This is totes fine. Somebody should have told Jerry Ryan that, or rather told Jerry Ryan's detractors that back in 1997 and 1998, right? Where when she was getting all sorts of attention, positive and negative, for the costume that she wore as Seven of Nine. But aside from Marvel having no problem marketing Scarlett Johansson's beauty and her curves, I'd also like to point out that there's this thing called cosplay. And guess what? Cosplay is real women who don't have the budget of a Hollywood studio still going out of their way to make themselves look like the characters that they admire. After all, why would you go through all this trouble to do your hair, buy the costume, or sometimes make the costume, get the makeup, work out and get yourself in a certain look just to look like this for a little bit? You don't go through all that trouble unless you actually really like the character, I would imagine, or just you like dressing up. But still, real woman in the real world who is not an actress, who did a damn good cosplay of the classic Miss Marvel, in my personal opinion. Here's another one, right? Which is a more, let's say, feminine take on the current Captain Marvel look. And as you can see, as I said, we put a fit woman in a jumpsuit. Certain things will be emphasized. Certain things will be emphasized, and a man's eyes and some women's eyes are going to be drawn to what stands out. And then, of course, there's this one too. So again, show me again where this is not appealing to the male gaze. Just because you're not showing as much skin does not mean you are not appealing to the attractive elements, let's say, of the female aesthetic, which, yes, will attract the male gaze and the male gaze and the female lesbians and straight women and a whole other bunch of people. Because guess what? Beautiful women are very just eye-catching and fun to look at. But anyway, that's the video. That's the way too long video. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you around. Bye.